Hello everyone and welcome to today's Lucas Systems webinar, which is titled Smartphones, Tablets, and the Transformation of Mobile Work in the DC. My name is John Schriefer and I'm Marketing Communications Manager at Lucas. I'll be providing a brief introduction to the topic and then I'll be bringing in Steve Urich, who's the real expert on the subject. Steve is Director of Speech and Mobile Technologies at Lucas, and his team here is responsible for evaluating all of the new mobile technologies and hardware devices we use in our mobile work execution solutions. So let's take a quick look at the agenda before we get started. So the main focus for this presentation is to look at the pretty monumental changes that are going on right now in the world of mobile applications and hardware used in the DC. In particular, DC hardware is in the early stages of a major transition from today's legacy Windows-based RF guns, handhelds, and wearable computers to Android-based devices, including ruggedized smartphones, tablets, and some so-called touch computers that are introduced by companies like Zebra Technologies, as well as traditional handhelds and guns that in the future will be running Android as well.
On the software side, 10 years ago there were a handful of Lucas customers that were using voice and scanning side by side. While today we see many DCs with Lucas Move applications using speech recognition, barcode scanning, voice direction, and visual information to create what you might think of as multi-sensory applications that make work easier, faster, and better for associates in the DC. Steve and I are going to talk about these hardware and software changes, and then we'll provide a few basic rules or things to consider when you're looking to invest in your next mobile applications and hardware. And like I said, we'll get through this in 15 to 20 minutes and then take your questions. All right, so first let's take a quick look at the evolution of mobile hardware over the last decade or so. Since 1998, Lucas has been providing mobile work execution software for improving picking and other hands-on tasks in the DC. One component of our solutions are mobile voice-directed applications that guide workers through their tasks in the most efficient means possible. When we first introduced our mobile applications, the mobile computers that were available in the late 1990s couldn't reliably support voice. So we used proprietary voice-only appliances or wearables. Now those voice-only devices, they were good for voice, but only voice, and they were fairly expensive. In the early 2000s, we were asked by lots of large manufacturers, distributors, and other people we were working with why they couldn't run our applications on devices they were using for RF applications. The idea was, why should I buy a single-use device when I already bought these other computers that I'm using in my DC? So at around that time, we worked pretty closely with Symbol Technologies, which, as those of you in the industry know, is now part of Zebra, to certify the Symbol RF hardware to use with our mobile applications. And then we deployed our first customers on standard Symbol hardware in 2005, and by 2007 we'd certified standard warehouse devices from all of the major RF hardware providers. This transition to standard multi-function hardware allowed DCs to use the same device for voice-directed applications and RF applications, and it also led to a surge in the use of Lucas applications that not only incorporated voice direction and speech recognition, but also barcode scanning and screens. These were the first generation multimodal applications. Around the same time that the warehouse market was discovering the possibilities of multimodal applications running on standard RF hardware, there were bigger happenings in the wider mobility market. In particular, the introduction of the Apple iPhone in 2007, and then after that, the boom in the smartphone market, which rapidly had a major impact on enterprise IT, as people were starting to use their iPhones and other smartphones for connecting to enterprise email, but also other applications. So, while all that was going on, it wasn't too long until DC operators were again asking us, why can't we run our Lucas applications on a smartphone? And as everyone here today knows, the smartphone technology has rapidly advanced and matured. So it really was just a matter of time until we were able to run our applications on Android smartphones. And in 2014, we introduced our latest version of mobile applications, Lucas Move, which now supports Android smartphones in addition to traditional warehouse devices running Windows. Last year, we deployed our first customers on smartphones, and the number of customers on smartphones is rapidly growing. And we'll touch on some of the industries and some of the companies that are using smartphones today in their DC a little bit later in the presentation. While we were deploying smartphones for our applications, the traditional warehouse hardware suppliers aren't standing pat by any means. Zebra has made their own entry into the market with some, for lack of a better term, smartphone-like touch computers that are running Android. And they're also introducing Android versions of their traditional warehouse guns and handhelds. So you might be picking up on a little theme here. This move to Android and Android smartphones is part of a wider transition in the hardware market that is due in part to the planned sunset of Windows Mobile and Windows CE, which is the Windows operating system that has really been the de facto standard in the warehouse market for the last 15 years. This sunset of Windows Mobile and Windows CE is really a really major seminal event for anyone using mobile applications and RF devices in a warehouse. And to talk a little bit more about that, I'd like to bring in Steve Urek to talk a little bit about Windows Mobile sunset.
Sure, thanks, John. So as John mentioned, Microsoft is sunsetting Windows Mobile and CE, and unfortunately they haven't provided an easy path for transitioning existing software applications to their newer mobile OS options. As such, legacy applications need to be rewritten or replaced to run on different operating systems, and there's no easy way around it. And so the question is, which operating system to target? Well, you obviously want to transition to a modern and active operating system, and one can't argue with the impressive success of Android in the consumer market. Android is winning there, and with that momentum now gaining on the mobile enterprise front, being helped by the fact that consumers are now very familiar and comfortable with Android. And there are other factors for the gains of Android as well, such as the popularity in the development community because of the popularity of the Java programming language, which is the core language for developing Android applications. Additionally, we've seen a steady progression of Android releases over the years to shore up features and performance, things like security with the addition of enhanced encryption, improved VPN support, and compliance with various regulatory certifications across industries like government, retail, healthcare. So in short, Android has grown up, so to speak, evolving into a very feature-rich and robust operating system. So seeing this coming, several years back, Lucas, enhanced our core client software that we call Lucas Move again, to enable it to run on Android platforms, allowing us to offer really the widest device choices among our competitors. So let's talk about those choices for a minute. So here we list vendors who currently offer mobile devices that Lucas has certified for our solutions. As shown on the left, this includes Windows Mobile CE devices from leading providers such as Zebra, Honeywell, and Datalogic. On the right, we have our providers of Android-based devices. Now note that Zebra offers devices in both areas, again, as they look to provide their customers a migration path away from Windows Mobile and CE devices. So for example, Zebra offers Android-based devices like the TC70 mobile computer and also their new wearable computer, the WT6000. Actually, for most vendors in this list, Lucas has certified multiple mobile devices, giving our customers, again, a wide range of choices. For example, on the Samsung side of things, Samsung devices include the Galaxy S5, S6, S7, and even the Tab A tablet for vehicle mount applications. With these kind of devices, you generally find better hardware specs and additional features such as NFC that are not provided by traditional industrial devices running Windows, traditional Windows. By the way, we leverage NFC technology in multiple ways in our solution, including for allowing Bluetooth headsets and scanners to be paired very simply by touching them together for a second. Now, sometimes we're asked about the durability associated with some of our device choices, including the Samsung choices that I just mentioned. Yes, this should be a factor in your final device choice going forward. But one of the things we're finding is that proper case configuration is really the key there. In fact, with our recommended case configurations, any of our Android devices meet the same military standard drop and IP ratings as most traditional industrial devices. Of course, our device options also differ in other ways, including size, ergonomics, and obviously price. So these are all factors that you want to take into account in order to choose the best device for both your operational and business requirements. Okay, so in addition to the mobile device choices themselves, for a complete solution, you really also want choices around accessories. Now, the evolution of some accessories has been across the board in terms of the mobile devices that can leverage them. For example, our wireless headset options are compatible not only with our Android-based devices, but also with several of our traditional device options, such as the Zebra MC32N0. Other accessories, such as smartwatches, may only be utilized from a selection of our Android options. And by the way, we use smartwatches to conveniently provide users with important information at a glance, such as next pick location information, product descriptions, images, product images, and so forth. On the barcode scanning side of things, traditional warehouse devices typically have an internal scanner that can be utilized. And again, we have options along those lines still. And then, when you look at smartphones like the S6 or S7, for example, they offer a built-in camera which can be utilized to also scan barcodes. But really, for anything but very light scanning needs, we do recommend utilizing in that configuration a Bluetooth scanner paired with the smartphone options. And these Bluetooth scanners come in a variety of form factors, including wearable ring configurations, such as the one we're showing in this slide on the top. We currently have 5 different certified scanner models available along those lines, and obviously they do add some additional costs if required, so this should be considered as part of your overall mobile device choice. Finally, we see even more types of accessories on the horizon. For example, we're currently researching how wearable RFID readers can be leveraged in our solutions. Same with the smart glasses. So we should talk for a minute about how these kinds of things are enabling the creation of smarter applications.
Right. So as Steve mentioned, having NFC capabilities built in the device, we're already using that in some places. And really, the smartphone in particular, they're adding new capabilities on the device that really creates new opportunities for application providers like Lucas to find new ways to use those technologies, not necessarily to do new things, but in a lot of cases it's to solve old problems. For example, one area where there's a lot of interest in development is in the use of new display technologies, whether on smartwatches, and Steve gave a couple of examples, or looking a bit down the road, smart glasses in which you could actually put visual cues that would be included essentially in a user's field of vision to create a sort of augmented reality within the warehouse. Or, you could see situations where you might more easily incorporate RFID technology within a voice-directed application, which could be especially important with the increasing need in some sectors in particular to capture product-level serial data as product moves through the supply chain. Steve, do you have anything to add along those lines?
Yeah, so one way to think about it, I guess, is when you have a combination of a modern operating system, as we talked about earlier with Android, and new hardware features on devices and interesting hardware accessories to leverage, there's really becomes a tremendous opportunity for innovation on the application side of things, and so at Lucas we believe that combination of things allows us to achieve truly intelligent mobile work execution solutions that can really drive great results for our customers.
Right. So we just spent a couple of minutes talking a little bit about the evolution of the hardware and some of the futures and what that may lead to in the future in terms of application functionality. But I wanted to bring this back a little bit to the present and talk a bit about where Android smartphones are being used today. Now, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but there were plenty of naysayers, people who were saying, that you can't use a smartphone in a warehouse. And what we've seen is, these devices have worked out really well over the 2 years that we've been putting them in production since then. We deployed our first production systems in 2015. One of those early customers was .com Distribution, which today has hundreds of users doing e-commerce fulfillment for dozens of customers. Another of those initial customers was Awana Clubs, which is a longtime Lucas customer that is today using smartphones for picking, replenishment, and other applications. And as you can see from this list of industries, smartphones are really in use across industries. We have some mid-sized companies. We have single-site distributors like Awana, and there are also some Fortune 100 companies that are now using smartphones in their DCs. But beyond smartphones, we've also recently deployed Zebra's TC70, an Android-based touchscreen computer, at one of our existing customers. As a matter of fact, we have several Lucas customers that are transitioning to next-generation Android devices in whole or in part. Interestingly, one of those customers that worked with us pretty closely on testing and certifying new device platforms, they're planning to move over to Android at new locations, in large part because their users just flat out preferred the form factor and ergonomics of those more modern devices. So that's a situation where you have essentially the users pushing back and saying, these devices are just plain better. I prefer using them, and that pushes companies in that direction. And that goes to another aspect of these devices that we haven't even really touched on much. But in addition to some good financial reasons to move to smartphones, we've seen that there are pretty compelling user advantages to these newer platforms as well. And at this point, I think it's far more than half of all new Lucas customers are selecting Android devices, principally smartphones, but we expect to see more and more on other devices as well. And we believe this trend will accelerate, at least among our customers. For most DCs that are using mobile applications and devices today, the next few years are going to be a major transition phase to the sunset of Windows Mobile and Windows CE. So it's really interesting times, both in the hardware and the software space, and there clearly are some questions you have to ask and answer when you are making your next generation hardware or software purchasing decisions. So Steve, maybe you can run through some of these considerations.
Yeah, sure. And this is sort of a summary. Also, our recommendation first and foremost is really to consider what application functionality you need. For example, do you capture serial data at the point of pick? Let those kinds of things guide your hardware selection process rather than kind of honing in on a piece of hardware that might limit your application choices. So, what are those key considerations in hardware selection? Well, first of all, the news is good in terms of Lucas provides, a path for lots of choices there, so you can really tailor things to your needs. We believe feature set and technology and total cost of ownership are the key considerations, and having, that variety of choices among mobile devices and accessories allows you to, again, select a set of hardware tailored for your requirements. And that's from both a functional and economic standpoint. Actually on the economic side, we also encourage you to look at costs associated with hardware maintenance versus a simple, perhaps more cost-effective replacement strategy there. And then last, and it's been kind of a theme in our presentation, a big consideration is the operating system in your hardware evaluation, particularly the Android operating system moving forward.
Thanks, Steve. So that was the last slide in the presentation. And like I said at the beginning, and I understand there were some audio difficulties at the start, but we're going to be doing now a Q&A session. If you have a question, please type in your question on the Q&A box on your screen and hit send, and that will come directly to us, and we will answer your questions as they come in. We do have about 5 minutes left here to take some questions, and we do have a couple. That have come in. So, Steve, I think this is a good one for you. Is it possible to run Windows and Android devices in the same DC?
Yes, so absolutely. And I think, John, you mentioned earlier we actually have customers doing this. In particular, replacing older Windows CE-based devices on an as-needed basis with the Android-based options that we have today.
We just got another question. What about support for iOS, the Apple mobile operating system?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, they, if you look at the Android OS market share versus iOS, I mean, there's a big delta there. But iOS still has, what we would call significant share. Really what we've done with our software, the Lucas Move software, has made it cross-platform compatible. And, really when we did that several years back, iOS was one of our first targets, and Android came after that. But since we've seen such a momentum shift on the Android side that we have focused on Android, again, we can support iOS. I think one of the considerations there is does Apple offer compelling choices on the hardware side? Again, in terms of feature set and capabilities, and at the same time, the value that you can find, is it comparable? And frankly, we haven't seen a lot of interest from that standpoint. We all know Apple products tend to be at a premium price level, and when there's alternatives in the market with similar features and functionality that are at a much lower price level, then those devices become more interesting.
Thanks, Steve. let's see, we have one question here. It goes to WMS. How robust does your WMS need to be to run with smartphone devices? Do you want to start this? You want me to? Let me start answering that. So the way the Lucas solution works, I mean, we can run with any WMS or even an ERP system, a custom-built inventory system, and our solution really insulates the back end from the mobile application. So we do have customers that are running legacy WMS systems, and I believe some of our smartphone customers, they have a legacy custom-built WMS. So that is not in any way a limiting factor to who can use Android smartphones in their DC. There was let's see here. What happens when Android moves to Marshmallow and beyond? Can your system transition without cost? So, Android, they name their different versions of their operating system candy bar names, and so I guess one of the later versions is Marshmallow. So what happens when they transition to their next version?
Yes, and Nougat now. So, yeah, I mean, so the thing is, when we certify a device, we obviously certify it under its prevailing operating system version at the time. But as new versions are rolled out for that same device, we continue to keep up with those. Sort of let's call it a recertification process. And sometimes there's no need to modify our software for the new version, and sometimes there is. And if there is, our guidance to customers is to obviously wait on that upgrade, and we provide some tools and utilities that kind of ensure that. And then at the appropriate time, make the move to that newer operating system, assuming there's some capabilities you want to leverage from it. And at that time, maybe we will deploy a Lucas software update to correspond with it.
Right. And we have another question about barcoding options, and hopefully I'm interpreting this correctly. What barcoding options are there outside of the two mentioned from Zebra, Motorola? I think we mentioned Zebra, Honeywell, DataLogic devices that we've certified. So I'm not.
Yeah, and there's a few others on the list. Socket Mobile is one. We have 3 of their Bluetooth scanners certified. We're actually very close to completing certification from another vendor as well. So, the good news there is, there is a market for these things, paired with smartphones in particular. So companies are motivated to, again, introduce new and innovative and very flexible options, and we look to, leverage those as we put together our final solutions.
Great. Let's see. Oh, there's a question about using smartphones in freezers. That's a good question. That was one of those. I mentioned there were a lot of naysayers, and there was, you can't use smartphones in a warehouse. We actually have deployed smartphones to customers who are using them in freezers. If you give them the proper protection, in a case, in a freezer pouch, typically worn against the body. And in fact, we had, in years past, we've been deploying devices, in freezers that the device manufacturers might not have certified to be in plain air in a freezer, but when they're kept in a pouch, and the users in the freezer, typically in a freezer coat, they perform perfectly well in that environment. So it's really not a limit. That freezers aren't a limitation for the devices. Of course, if you wanted to take them out and see the screen, they're not meant for that environment. But in most cases, that's not the use case, and that's not the way they are used in a freezer environment.
Particularly with voice voice applications such as ours.
Exactly. Yep. Great point. Let's see. We have another question about lockdown. Again, is it possible to prevent users from using other applications?
Yes. So, when we deploy one of our smartphone options, we provision each smartphone with a lockdown utility that prevents users and limits their accessibility to system settings and non-work related apps. Also, as I mentioned earlier, can prevent accidental operating system updates and just sort of locks down the smartphone. There's different levels to this question, I think, as well. Smartphones are obviously then compatible with a very wide range of third-party products, mobile device management products that offer even more advanced capabilities, discouraging theft, for example, by rendering the device useless if it's based on location or time boundaries or other criteria. So, that's the other thing. That compatibility is also an important decision point or factor to consider in your hardware choice.
Great, thanks, Steve. Well, again, we're at about 33 minutes after the hour, so I think that's all the time we have today. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Watch your email for a copy of the slides later today, and then we will have a replay available probably within a week. And also watch your email for upcoming webinars. We hold these about every 2 or 3 months. And, of course, if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear us cover, please feel free to send us an email and let us know. Again, thanks very much. Have a good afternoon.